Trainwreck. Memoirs. Prologue. I am by nature an optimistic person, so when encountered with all this bullshit, I could only turn it into a positive by writing about it for 3 reasons. It was necessary. For 3 reasons it was necessary. It was sort of therapy. Writing has always been therapy for me. Number 2, everyone loves to watch a train wreck, and that sure as hell is what my life turned into for a while, so why not make it profitable? Number 3, accountability. I love the truth, and the only way to make the bastards pay was to tell the truth. And I've sat by idling long enough. To elaborate on number 2 a little further is needed to understand the statement, since I'm alluding to finding whatever way there is to capitalize on the situation. In this case, the only way me and my children could benefit from all this bad stuff would be to write a book about it, knowing how everyone loves to watch a train wreck. Maybe they'll pay to read or hear the story about when my life turned into a train wreck, figuratively speaking, although railroads are relevant to the story, especially of my history and background. I am the product of the rural Midwest, and also 100% German, but 6th generation American. Full-bred country girl who grew up in the shadows of small-town America at a time when things were changing so fast that no one even knew it was happening. Really, it was the cusp of a time and another, all cascading in societal factors that would often come into play regarding the direction and outcome of serious situations in my life, defining moments. Politics and social commentary are not my main area of expertise, so I'll shy away from saying too much about stuff I don't know which I consider important in general. I try to speak only the truth, at least as I see it, although I don't think truth is different from one person to the next. The truth is the truth. Liars, hypocrites, and manipulators may argue with you about it all day long and still not speak the truth, but that doesn't change it. The only alterations to the truth are done in one's perspective of it, which is oftentimes a personal distortion, trickery people use to lie to themselves when they cannot handle the truth or when they do not want to admit it, whether it be pride or control or sadness that provokes them to hide honesty from themselves. I cannot speak for anyone but myself, but it seems I see many of these reasons lingering in the lives of others. I'd like to think I'm honest with myself. Truly, how can anyone know for sure if they are being honest with oneself or with themselves? I not only tell myself the truth, I wade in tears of it daily, or at least did for a long time. Part 1. The Summer of Thistle. One thing I fought for months this year, which rang as symbolism even in the moment with thistle. I stepped on it, grabbed it, hiked through it, fought with it with my kids. When we were playing in the woods, I had to dig it out of flower beds and scratch it off my skin. At times I even breathed it in. That's a weed that attacks back. This weed is no harmless dandelion. Never in my life have I encountered so much thistle, and that's what my year was like too. Thistle, unsightly with far-reaching unexpected pains that linger long after the weed's been pulled, or the life event occurred out of nowhere seemingly, yet left lasting ripples or rivers of BS. Whether it was dealing with a crushing loss, theft, car wreck, you name it, most likely it happened this year. Here's a few highlights. 1. I wrecked 2 F-250s this year. 2. I went to the ER at least 10 times. 3. Grieved the loss of children. 4. Was chased around and held at gunpoint. 5. Was robbed multiple times in multiple places. 6. Lost thousands of dollars, not to mention priceless things. And 7. That's not all. I am not a complete derelict. I am not a bad person. I am not stupid, although from the looks of my wrecked life, one might think I am all or any of those things. They're wrong. Although I sometimes feel like I'm stupid or bad because I've allowed these horrible things to happen. Trust me, I hate myself for letting my life turn into this train. But I also deep down know why I did these things, or the things leading up to one unfortunate event after another. When I made what seemed like a bad decision, it was because I thought I had either lack of options or resources. Purebred country girl. It's hard being a trusting small woman in a big man's world, especially regarding business and legalities, both of which I have I often have encounters with, unpleasant, might I add. I was a teacher for about 10 years, and I am from a small town. Basically, I've been in the hub of good, trusting, well-intentioned, helpful people for the vast majority of my life. So leaving the safety of these cocoons and moving to the realm of self-employment in the big city was not what I expected. I knew that there could be problems venturing away from home. After all, this isn't the first time I've lived in the city. I'm not ignorant or backwards. But part of my thought process was I didn't feel safe at home anymore, which was why I left in the first place. Secondly, there just aren't very many opportunities for employment in my hometown. In a lot of ways, I didn't feel like I had much of a choice in any of my moves. I just jumped from one bad situation to whichever lifeboat I could jump on. Basically, I've always had my hands full, my dreams big, money tight, resources indefinite. Necessity is the mother of invention. Coming from a farming family with entrepreneurs and local politicians on one side and a family largely self-employed independent business owners, and I have a tendency towards self-reliance. I'm well acquainted with Emerson, having been an English teacher and having my father quote Henry David Thoreau in my childhood lessons have made me rather inclined to DIY or the do-it-myself attitude. Another bit of background to help clarify my character. I've said many times, I'm what happens when you grow up without anyone watching. That's not to say I didn't have any supervision. Just I spent so much time alone and away from others' sight. I was an only child and spent much of my childhood on acreage in the country where no neighbors could be seen. I say this because it explains some of my quirkiness, for lack of a better term, maybe eccentricities. Another thing while we're on the topic of Thoreau, I too want to be master of my own destiny and dictator of my own day. I think the world is better when it's full of authentic, original, independent, kind, creative, thoughtful, well-intended, hard-working people. I'd like to think I'm one of them. At times I would have thought, without a doubt, said those characteristics. I would have, without a doubt, said I fit into those characteristics. I'm also overly sensitive, very emotional, lacking in self-discipline, also known as wild, or a little too wild for my own good. At least, I'm also a risk taker and an exceptionally curious individual. I appreciate goodness and beauty. I like to have something pretty to look at and to listen to. Music has saved my life at least a time or two. Seriously, it felt like at times was the only thing keeping me alive. It at times was the only thing keeping me alive. Which brings me to the fire. Without music, my physical body may not have died, but I still might have. At least the important part of me that I've always felt needs protection from the brutality of the world. Partly why I've always felt it was important to hold on to my youthfulness, and I'm not talking about beauty like my face, but my attitude and outlook. Maintaining that childhood curiosity, the new-eyed amazement that graces the face of those looking out in wonder and awe. This is reminiscent of a deep level of appreciation and gratitude that is hard to hold on to in the adult world, especially the one we live in today, which is not the same world as our parents introduced to as adults, which is very relevant societal commentary. A couple things. One, our societies moved from being mostly rural to mostly urban. Number two, the necessity to have two incomes to maintain a middle-class life. Number three, the advent of the internet, cell phones, and all the ways that they track and watch, and talk, and such. Number one, to elaborate. The opportunities and people left my hometown en masse for the first generation since we came from Germany. Number two, to elaborate, I couldn't financially do what my parents did, even with a bachelor's degree. Number three, the world I was raised to expect is not what I got. For this, I was not prepared adequately. I've also always felt a little like an oddball outcast, or like I didn't quite stack up so well in comparison with others. I've been told more times that I have potential than I've been told I did a good job. I'm not so much insecure as I am self-doubting. It's like I know I'm a good person, I think I'm smart and capable, but I don't feel like I am. It's hard to explain these shades of gray. As a child, I never felt like I was good enough, and this is carried over into a twisted element of self-sabotage I at times unwittingly unleash on myself as an adult. Normal is relative. As a child, the world that is directly there defines the world in total. Frame of reference perspective as an adult, we are far more reaching to understand in duality, but in our childhood, we're all limited to our own experiences, and that makes up our world. Similarly, each of us has our hardest hardship, deepest sadness. No matter the triggering offense, your worst hurt may have hurt just as much as another person's who experienced what would be defined as a much more horrific event, I suspect. But how is anyone to truly know the depth of another's sadness? Woe is me is not a pretty face to see. I prefer to assume that the world is hard for all of us in our own way. By the way, I want everyone to be happy, but I realize a lot of people have it way worse than me. This is simply my story. I found myself at the end of spring starting over again. No car, no official employment. My self-employment has never been taken seriously by family or significant others. No money, still no kids except for on the weekends. Not even that without a vehicle. No boyfriend, which led to no house, and also not having much of my shit because I left it there. And at the time, couldn't just go back and get it. I found myself in the situation where I had lost everything that I loved, and I'd lost everything I needed for survival, for the most part. I'm sure I still had my hiking boots, camping supplies, and tools, but that was as far as my resources reached. Tools take into account antiques, personal belongings that I've been hanging on to, typically hiding in an attic or basement somewhere. I've left a lot of stuff in a lot of places. I've been known to shove shit in every nook and cranny, which is why when I found myself in this predicament, the smart idea seemed to be sell all the shit. At least what wasn't sentimental, which items take on a whole level of sentimental importance that I don't quite understand myself. I find this behavior of mine exceptionally annoying, especially when I have to move heavy boxes. For example, books I've had for years but haven't read in years also. Knickknacks that remind me of someone I love or a great time I had. Those are hard for me to part with. That and tools, music instruments, and craft and art supplies. These things all hang around me in droves, like an army of all the good I've left behind, or want to do, or I'm afraid will never return. I've come to expect misery, hardship, and sadness. It's been my status quo for so long. Tears occur daily, often many times. Defeat feels definite almost every morning. Waking up without a real reason to live gets harder and harder every day. Well, of course, I stay alive for my children, but I can't see either of them right now, so oftentimes I feel like they're gone entirely, or at least right now they're gone entirely, and that's unbearable. I was 3 months pregnant when I graduated college, so dreams I had got put on hold so I could go back to school and get my teaching certificate and be a teacher so I could be there for my daughter. I was happy to do this. I never felt resentful or regretful regarding this choice. But when my children were no longer with me, I had no motivation to do well. This is a good example of me punishing myself without really realizing it at the time. Wallowing in grief and self-pity is not my style, but some days I couldn't help but be in the trenches. No one can withstand that amount of loss without some wallowing. I know the saying, lose the victim mentality. Well, no matter which way you look at it, you were victimized, and you have to deal with the emotional onslaught afterwards until it wears off. If we don't wear our feelings and wear them off, then we just keep carrying around their weight indefinitely. I'd rather not do that because I think it will make me bitter, mean, and ugly inside. These are things that are rarely shown but often felt. Education is no longer an option for employment. I hate waitressing, dislike and feel horribly uncomfortable. In the corporate world, dog eat dog isn't for people like me who want to cuddle a kitten. Collecting, antiquing, repair, restoration, appreciation for quality craftsmanship, unique handmade items with some character and history behind them have always been my inclination. I once did not go into a big box store for a decade. So for a second-hand shop with antiques and vintage items seemed the obvious step. I also like to tinker around and fix things, paint things, dot. I rented a little shop on one of the busier roads in a pretty trendy side of town and set off to open a store. I knew it was risky, but it seemed like the only option at the time. I wanted to move back home and be with my son, but his dad said I wouldn't be allowed to see him. I wouldn't be allowed to see him any more than what was already allowed. And to be that close to him and not be able to see him would be unbearable. I know I've done it before. So the city was the only option. I couldn't afford a place to live and a place to work, so it seemed to make sense to sort of split the difference. I'd spend the work week in the city and go home the week for a day, and on the weekend, when it was time to see my son, because doing it this way I could afford the shop and stay with my family a few days a week for free. This way, what money and resources I did have, I could put to work for me in a way that aligned with my principles. Even if I ventured outside of self-employment and gotten a regular job, I wouldn't have been able to afford everything I needed to live. A BA in English isn't really great when it comes to specified gainful employment. My only adult work experiences were teaching and waitressing and selling antiques and such. And plus, I also get sick all the time because I have mono. The year before, I'm allergic to most antibiotics.